Today's video is going to be about something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, and the reason that I've been thinking about it is, well, I've been neglecting my garden this summer just because I've been gone a lot and on trips, and so it's just been making me think about all sorts of different things. The Bible's full of different allegories involving gardening. One of my favorite is when Jesus talks about how plants are pruned back, and because that's something, if you do gardening, you'll know that you often chop back a plant because it'll grow back even stronger, and out of the place where you chopped one branch, it's like two will often sprout out, and you get a much thicker, fuller plant that way, and you get more fruit that way too. And so a lot of times I'll think of little garden analogies about life, and this is one that I've been thinking about. So, like I said, I've just been watering enough to keep things alive, basically. And if you have a well-established garden, you probably don't even have to do that, really. If you've carefully selected the plants that can live in your climate, things will survive, but it'll be different. It's not going to thrive, and there's a difference between nature and a garden. And the very first two creations, well, people that God populated this place with were gardeners. The first two humans were gardeners, and I think that we're supposed to have gardens. And it reminds me of how going to Versailles, I really wasn't that impressed with the building is very impressive, but the stuff inside of it, is shiny and all that. What would be really impressive about things like Versailles is the eras when they were running at full steam, when Versailles was a living, breathing building, that every room had a purpose, and the people who actually built it were running it. That would be amazing. But today, what's amazing to go see are the gardens that are still there, and not just big fields of grass. That is a conspiracy, I believe, that Americans are obsessed with their grass, lawns, and we should all have gardens, herb gardens, veggie gardens. So anyways, the gardens of Versailles are beautiful, and has anyone been there and gone inside? They have these like gated off, well, it's like a wooden gated square areas, or rectangle, I don't remember. And you can go inside of them, and there's these little paths and wild strawberries growing, and so beautiful. That's what our lives are supposed to be, not working for a paycheck. And we're supposed to grow beautiful gardens and enjoy life. And yeah, nature can be beautiful, but when there's a human hand there who can garden, things can flourish and thrive in ways that it won't be in nature. It reminds me of how in nature often the fruit is tiny and bitter, and just imagine the difference between an apple orchard that's well taken care of versus just a wild crab apple, and the quality of fruit, the things that the human enjoyment that we can get out of it, and the different varieties. God actually, that's the grain of truth to the whole evolution BS, is that God made this place with organisms to be highly adaptable. In my backyard, I've had a wild blackberry / raspberry hybrid happen in my backyard. And a friend of mine has made their own type of bean in their backyard. And, we're not genetic scientists or anything. We're just two people growing a garden in our backyard, and we're getting hybrids. And the biggest lies about evolution, it's very similar to the outer space stuff. They want the lie to be like, oh, you'll never be able to have anything to do with this. That's why with outer space they tell you it's so far away, and oh, our technology is so far, we'll never be able to get there. They won't say, yeah, you'll never get there because there's a firmament in the way. But anyways, the same thing with evolution and all that. They don't want you to know that within a few seasons you can make your own hybrid crops, and that you can see adaptation happen in real time in your own home garden. If you want to be a biologist, have your own home garden and pay attention. Just today, it made me kind of think of the whole, if if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, and how nature is metal. Nature doesn't care. People worship nature and nature is so amazing. Yeah, God's creation. God created everything and it's good and it's beautiful. But nature on its own, without a gardener, without an observer, it's a little cold. Imagine, it reminds me of the tree. If a tree falls and nobody's around to hear it. Sure, it'll excite the sound waves, but does it really make a sound if the world was full of no sentient beings? What would be different between a world without sentient beings and a computer program? So yeah, I think nature without a sentient being to observe it is cold. Maybe that. I've been seeing a lot of people talk about the double slit experiment recently and what its implications on the nature of reality are. I think that maybe the answer, what the double slit experiment tells us, is that if there aren't any sentient beings around to hear, that a tree doesn't make a sound, that a world without an observer is pointless and no different than a computer program. And that's where the nature observers the nature worshippers get that wrong, and they forget. Take a nature worshipper and drop them in the middle of the Amazon and see how well they do with their loving, what they think is loving nature. Nature doesn't care. Nature isn't I don't think that nature is like a being to be worshipped. And it's what God created, and it is good, and it'll go on without you. But it won't thrive in the same way. That's just what I was thinking with the garden. Like, hey, the garden survived without me, but if I want to impress people that are coming over to my house and I want it to be really pretty for this event, I'm not just going to let nature take its course. I'm going to water the plants, and it's amazing what happens when somebody's there to water a garden instead of just letting things go crazy. So I just have some pictures from my house. Here, this is when nature takes its course. This is like a 3rd generation Brussels sprout or something that I've tried to grow. I have such a hard time. I can't grow. I just don't think it grows in this area. Or I just suck at it. I'm going to have to do different things. I've tried growing different cabbages or lettuce. I don't even do that great with a lot of herbs. Just start to bolt immediately. It's like here in Oregon, by the time it starts to get sunny, it's just too intense. And then, yeah, things like lettuce or herbs or Brussels sprout, it just bolts immediately. But nature persists. Without God made, it reminds me of those things where, somebody made a terrarium that is self-sustaining for decades and decades. God made a creation that he knew would be self-sustaining until he decided that it's over and cleansed with fire. But even then, after, there's still going to be a physical creation, I believe. Anyways, this is what I think of when, like, life finds a way, but it kind of struggles, and nature is really unforgiving, and you're not gonna feed a family off of just letting nature do its own thing with Brussels sprouts in Oregon if you don't know what you're doing. Anyways, I don't know if that made sense, but I have some I like letting the volunteers do their thing, but they don't ever really produce anything of substance. Maybe they sustain like one small creature or something. Here's some asparagus on the right, and then lemon balm on the left just popping up. I have a lot of lemon balm that just grows like crazy. Raspberries do very well here. And they do kind of mostly do their own thing. I don't even water them, and they do pretty good. But they have a 2-year life cycle, which is pretty interesting. And I still have to come in here and clear stuff out every year. Otherwise, it would just be unmanageable bramble. And so even this takes effort, human intervening effort, to not just become unmanageable chaos. And the blackberries in Oregon are just that, unmanageable chaos. I have a lot of work I need to do getting rid of blackberries. They're really, really bad. And they're bitter, too. The ones right here. I think that maybe because these ones are growing next to, what is it? Laurel. there's a laurel tree, and thanks people, it's not even a laurel tree that's like helpful with helpful bay leaves. It's a conspiracy that people have stupid lawns and not growing things that you can use. Ornamental trees that just pollute the ground with a bunch of nasty stuff that's not even useful. No, a functioning society, probably they had all sorts of exotic fruit trees growing all over the place that are well maintained. People had amazing gardens full of medicinal herbs, and they didn't plant stupid ornamental laurel bushes that make everything in the area bitter. That's my guess, that why these blackberries are incredibly bitter. They're growing right next to a laurel bush or a laurel tree. This is what's happened in just a few years of letting one area of my yard go crazy. Just gets taken over. And a tree, this is where a tree got chopped down, but it just grows back. It's really hard to kill trees. God made amazing things. It's amazing. Does anybody who do gardening, you just get amazed at how resilient life is, how God made, and things are fractally, how plants, the way that plants grow, you can have a single plant, one of them decides to grow like a bush, the other one ends up growing like a tree. How adaptable God made this place is just mind-blowing. You can chop a tree down and it'll just keep sprouting. Man. This is a Asian pear tree. Just gets totally infested with bugs, though. Think of all the knowledge that has been lost about gardening and clean ways to keep bugs off your stuff. And here's another plant that is just kind of barely surviving. And I think it's just, must have been people like 20 years ago or something planted this. Is that fuchsia? They look like little lanterns. But it's just barely hanging on there. Every year it pops out, but yeah, definitely need to maintain my place a little bit better to let stuff thrive. And yeah, just it's what I've been thinking about, how nature's a little cold. Things will survive. God did make it so that the birds of the air don't have to make a plantation for them, so life sustains itself here. But the roses won't be as big, there won't be as many of them, you won't get as juicy fruit out of life if you're just dropped in the Amazon. You're gonna be not so happy. The fact that the very first two human beings that God created were gardeners, and yeah, I don't think that, I think that it's easy to put our own ideas on Adam and Eve, and I think that they often get portrayed as these, like, I'm not trash talking, I think that people can choose whatever nutritional system they want, but I don't think that they were necessarily like vegan type of gardener, like that type of gardeners. I just think sometimes the fact that they were gardeners, people think like, oh, they were just like eating leaves or something, and fruitarians, or I think that the garden that they had could have been much more for beauty things too, not just for food. I think that it probably was a beautiful garden and full of flowers and things. This is apples. Yeah. Japanese maples grow really well in Oregon. Kind of interesting. I think I mostly said everything. Yeah, I've just been thinking of how the difference that the human element makes to nature, and that nature isn't the end all be all. A lot of people end up worshiping nature, but look at the ways that nature is when there are no humans around. Yeah, just the other day I saw a video of a stork mother just chucking its baby out the nest and looking over the edge to make sure it hit the ground. And yeah, so these are just the things that I've been thinking about, looking at my neglected rose bushes, and I've been watering them, just watching them spring to life. So many roses, and it's for our enjoyment and God's enjoyment that we can be gardeners, and that we're supposed to be gardeners. And anyways, that's it for this video. I think I have a few more pictures. I'll show you the rest of the pictures. Artichoke, an orange, what is this? Calendula. This is a tomato volunteer. This just, again, kind of what's the difference between nature and what God has given us the ability to do here with gardening. And so this is just a tomato volunteer. It's really not the best area to grow tomatoes. But if gardening gets involved, planting them a little bit earlier than they're going to sprout up on their own, and watering them and giving them nutrients possibly. Just the difference between, like, this tomato, who knows, it might pump out 1 or 2 tiny little green tomatoes that survive, and then the next year it might pop out again. Versus when I actually purposefully grow tomatoes and I can get huge harvests. Well, that's it for this video. Praise God. God bless everyone.